Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of CVTV Podcast, an audio show for all those newbies in advanced aquarist. My name is Carlos. I'm your host, and I'm here with David Dawkin, co host and owner of CoralVue. How are you, Dave?
Doing good today, Carlos. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. As this podcast, I like the podcast format. It's a little more conversational. We get to have a little fun and everything. And I'm going to ask you. We kind of veered away from asking this question, but how's the weather down there right now?
Oh, it's nice. It's 68. Very nice weather.
Yeah,
it's
it's 40.
We got you for a little while.
Yeah, it's 40 degrees in here right now. It's pretty chilly. It's chilly, but it's not too bad. Actually, it was about 30 degrees this morning.
Wow.
If anybody's listening, Dave is owner of CoralVue, and CoralVue's headquarters is down in Louisiana, in Slidell. So you're just north of New Orleans. And I am in Chicago, Illinois. So the wonders of modern technology, we can have a conversation even though we are miles and miles away.
Yes.
Yes. So today's podcast, I'm actually looking forward to it. Today's podcast, we're going to discuss the importance of maintaining a healthy and thriving ecosystem. And we're going to concentrate on the protein skimmer. I know a lot of people talk about protein skimmers, and there's a lot of protein skimmers out there. But I remember when I was a newbie, trying to understand what is a protein skimmer, what are the benefits of using one, and how do they work? That was something that eluded me, and mainly because I don't know about you, Dave, but I started in freshwater, and in freshwater we don't use protein skimmers, so that the concept of a protein skimmer was completely new to me. How about you?
Absolutely. The evolution of protein skimmers has come so far, but if we go back to when you and I started getting into this, it was really a antiquated technology. The technology of protein skimming actually comes from the sewer industry, from my knowledge, and it's called foam fractionation. And it's a process of injecting air into a stream of water, and in the bubbles actually collect waste and rise. So
they're like magnetic beads that attract the waste, and it attaches to it, right?
Yeah, that's it. And it looks like, if you got it functioning properly, it looks like almost like snow inside of this chamber where you're injecting the water and air, and it creates a frothy rise of bubbles to the top that collect these organics in the water. We've really come a long way from where we were maybe 25 years ago to now, and the efficiency that we've been able to make these protein skimmers, almost to the point you can over skim.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to bring up the fact that we've all seen, and we are all familiar with protein skimming, because it's the foam you see on the ocean as you're walking on the side of the ocean, and you see that foam that is created by the waves. And that foam, if you look at it, sometimes it tracks this golden sheen, and it's dirt and it's dirty, and that's how the ocean kind of keeps itself clean, by pulling all this detritus, this dirt out of the water and into the sand. And then at the resorts they collect it, and they put it away, and the next morning they keep doing it again, over and over again. So we're going to discuss protein skimmers. What are they? We're going to go over the benefits of using one. How do they work? And also, we're going to talk about different types of skimmers. That is the one thing that is a little overwhelming as a beginner, was trying to figure out not only what kind of skimmer do I want, what size of skimmer, how to install it correctly. So we here at CoralVue, we've been distributing Reef Octopus, the most commonly known skimmer in the world, for over 20 years. We actually just have our 20th
Yeah,
anniversary. So we'll
it
have a
is.
big celebration about that. We'll do a
Yep.
podcast and all that. But anyway, we're going to talk about some of the most common questions that we get over the years. 20
Yep.
years of dealing with skimmers, there are questions that often, you know,
E-
get asked
Every day they
all the
come in.
time,
Every day.
every day. So we're going to cover those questions. And hopefully, by the time you're done listening to this podcast, hopefully you'll walk out with a little bit of knowledge and maybe some tips and tricks on how to make that skimmer work better. All right.
Yep.
So, Dave, let's talk about what is a protein skimmer? What's the basic function of a protein skimmer? Break it down to me, like the basic.
Basic function is to inject air and water into a vessel, and it has to be salt water. Now this won't work with fresh water. We get that a lot, Carlos. People are, hey, I'm testing out the skimmer. It's not making any bubbles. You will not make bubbles in fresh water. There's just no tension in the water
Mhm,
that allows bubbles to be made like with salt water. The density of the water is totally different. But
mhm.
basically that's it in a nutshell, is injecting air and water into a vessel that can collect the foam, and then it rises to the surface where the waste collects. And it keeps rising until it overflows into what we call a collection cup.
Okay.
That's
And
basically it in its simplest term.
yeah, and that collection cup, then the hobbyist takes that collection cup and you
Mm.
drain it, you clean it, and then you put it back
Yep.
in there, and then the process repeats. So the protein skimmer is constantly exporting nutrients,
Yep.
dirt, and things out of your system. Let's be honest, poop, pee from the fish
Yes.
out of the system so that it takes it out of the water and it doesn't foul the water. So that is
Yeah.
the basic concept. And like Dave alluded to, protein skimmers are a saltwater item. It's one of the very few items that does not cross over to freshwater. You will never find a freshwater protein skimmer that I can think of that works the same way, because as Dave said, the
Hmm.
tension of the water is different. So if you just got a protein skimmer and let's say you're going to test it on your sink or your tub, it's probably not going to work correctly because you're using fresh water. Fresh water won't work. It will not work.
We hear
All right.
this all the time.
Yes, that is one of the most common questions. My skimmer is
Yes.
not working. It's not producing any bubbles. And sometimes I
First
ask them,
question.
it's like,
Where's the
send me,
is
yes. Are you running it in fresh water or salt
if
water?
uh,
The funny thing is sometimes I get people that say, oh, I ran it in fresh water. And sometimes I don't hear anything back.
yeah. Yeah.
Then it's like, ooh, no.
Oh,
All right. So, what are the benefits of a protein skimmer? Why should we use a protein skimmer in salt water?
man, simplest terms, nutrient export. We
Mm,
got to get the waste from these animals out of the aquarium, out of the water column. And these protein skimmers, they really are a godsend because of how efficient they are in removing and extracting this waste. Um, Man, if you run a skimmer for any length of time and have a fish population and feed them, the smell and the gunk that you're going to remove, you are going to be shocked. So,
yes, my
yeah.
wife does not allow me to clean my protein skimmer when she's
Why
home. I
she's
have to, yes, I have to do it uh, on the weekends when she's not home or somewhere. But I am not allowed to do, especially during the winter when we have no windows
oh,
open. Yes, definitely. So
yeah,
I've learned my
guy.
lesson early enough. And happy life. And we say happy wife, happy life.
Yep, yep. Guys, if you got a good skimmer that's pulling waste,
Mm.
it's going to be a horrible, nasty smell. So just be prepared.
Yes. So the benefits are, you're exporting nutrients, which in turn it equates to better water quality,
Sure.
and better water quality also because the nutrients are being exported. You're preventing detritus from turning into nitrates and phosphates, then your algae growth is actually going to go down. And the two of them combined better water quality and no algae just equates to a just healthier reef tank overall. And visually, it just looks better,
Yeah,
you know? And
absolutely.
so we want to make sure that remember the protein skimmer is not one of those things that for a newbie when you're starting, it's one of those things that you should definitely consider.
Yeah.
Don't skimp on the skimmer because it makes a big difference. It makes your life easier. Remember, in the wild, in a reef, you have the ocean has currents, and those currents grab the nutrients that are sitting on top of the reef, and it just flushes them out, and new water comes in. We don't have that. We
Yeah.
don't have that in a box. This is not the wild. This is a box, and I'm pointing out to my aquarium. So we have to figure out ways to take that water and keep it clean on an ongoing basis. And yes, a water change will work, but you can't do a water change 24/7, not when you're starting. So the best
I
thing to
hear,
do is just get
yep.
a good skimmer.
Yeah, I hear people say, "Oh, you can get by without a skimmer," and I'm like, "Why would you want to?" We've come such a long way, and there's so many different price points for skimmers. That you can really find one to fit your budget, and it's going to work well. There's a lot of good skimmers out there, not just ones we sell, but um, you know, get a skimmer. It's just
Yeah.
going to make for a better system overall. I just highly recommend. Don't try and, you're going to spend a lot of money just keep doing water change after water change. But yeah, a
Not only
skimmer is a
not only
great tool.
Not only that, if your water quality is down, then the marine life is going to be stressed out. And you know what happens when fish get stressed, then they get ick,
Mm,
they die. And in the
yep.
long run, what you try to save by not installing a protein skimmer, you're gonna waste it by having to replace livestock. It
Yeah.
just, trust me, as Dave and I have been doing this for a long time. Combined, we have over 50 years. And, we don't want you to make the same mistakes that we made,
Yeah.
so
Mm-hmm.
trust us. And, if you don't trust me, go online and just go to social media and ask,
Mm-hmm.
should I get a protein skimmer or should I not? And I'm going to say most of the folks out there are going to tell you to get one. There's going to be
Yeah.
some guy over there that's probably going to say, no, you don't need one and all that. But again, that guy is probably not thinking like a newbie, not thinking,
Mm.
the way it was before. And in order to diminish that frustration, get a skimmer. It just makes it easier. All right. So Dave,
Even for the little tanks, Carlos, like a lot of
oh yeah,
people will have a lot small nano tanks and all. There's even tiny nano skimmers now, and they work
yes.
very well. So
Yeah.
something to
Wh-
just consider.
Which brings me to the next topic that we have on protein skimmers, and it is the type of protein skimmer.
Mm.
All right. So, types of protein skimmer. When I go to the store and I look for a skimmer, there's like what they call hang on the back skimmers. And then there's also internal skimmers. Then there's also space savers, which are also internal. It's like,
Mm.
wait a minute, what's the difference? And then there's the external skimmer, which looks very scary and complicated. So let's talk about each of those skimmer types, because one of the main questions we get asked all the time is like, hey, I'm new to the hobby. I'm trying to figure out what skimmer should I get. I don't know. I don't have the experience. I don't have the knowledge, and I don't want to waste money buying something that is not what I need. So can you help me out figuring out what skimmer I need? So let's go over the skimmers, Dave. The first one,
Okay.
HOB, which stands for
Hang on back.
hang on back. And those are used for usually smaller tanks. And what's the main attraction on an HOB skimmer?
Well, it's easy and convenient to install. It's mostly you're going to see those on tanks that are not drilled. If somebody just has like a bookshelf aquarium, you might call it, they don't
Mm-hmm.
have a overflow built into it. So you need a means of attaching filtration to basically just a box.
Yeah.
So that's where hang on the backs come in.
Yeah, and by meaning the overflow means that what you do is you have plumbing that takes water from the tank and brings it down into a location inside a cabinet where you hide your filtration. A lot of tanks do that. They have that, but there's some tanks where it's just four glass panes without anything, so you can't move the water into a hidden location. You have to figure out how to filter the water within those four walls. So the HOB, the hang on back skimmer, works perfectly well. It does have its limitations. It, there's a limit in terms of size of a tank. You get to a certain point where that HOB just becomes, we just can't handle it. And obviously, if you have a tank that is drilled that has the plumbing to go down to the bottom, then HOBs are not necessary, and I wouldn't get one. Why would you put a skimmer filter? Why would you put a device, that a filtration device, in visual tank outside so everybody can see when you can hide it under the cabinet? No.
You also have to keep in mind that you're going to have a space from the wall to the aquarium. You have to bring the aquarium away from the wall to have enough room for the hang on back. So that
Yes.
could be 3 inches, somewhere in that range. Some people don't like that look that the
Mhm.
aquarium's that far off of their wall. So it's an
Correct. Correct.
aesthetic thing as well.
And also, one thing to remember, it's Murphy's Law, which means that things that could happen will happen. And when you have something hanging on the side of the tank that it has water inside and is circulating water, if you don't maintain it and if it clogs up, then it's going to overflow, and then that water is going to end up on your floor. So
Mm-hmm.
those are the cons of having an HOB skimmer.
Not only that, Carlos, it also they have to pull a siphon from the
Mm.
aquarium and overflow too. So if you're not keeping track and watching that you can actually get bubbles in that overflow, and that will stop the skimmer from working. So little
Yes.
things like this, it has its pluses. It's convenient, easy to use and set up, but you got to mention its negatives as well.
That's correct. So if you have a small tank and you're looking for a skimmer, HOB is a good candidate, but do keep track of the negatives.
Mhm.
That's always, you make your list. Make your list, and then you make the decision. All right. The next type of skimmer is what we call the INT. It's that one goes into the sump, or the remote tank that is located under inside
Mhm.
the cabinet, so that you can hide the filtration. And let's talk about the INT skimmer. What are the benefits of it? I mean, that's probably the most common skimmer out there that people use.
Yeah. Absolutely. Most common. Yeah. First, I would think it's just convenience. It's you have a sump and INT, you place it right into the sump that it will fit in, and you plug it in, provide power, it's ready to roll. There's no plumbing to deal with. And so
I love that. And let's talk about if are there any negatives of it? I think it's just the size. It occupies
it's
space in
just,
your sump.
yeah,
It
that could
occupies
be the
space.
that could be the only downfall to it is, the larger the model, the more floor space you're going to need in your
Mhm.
sump, and also you have a pump that's connected to it,
On the
so you have
side.
to on the side, so you have to account for the footprint of the skimmer, not just the skimmer size itself. So you see on the skimmers that we sell, we actually put a footprint, so it's like a square footprint of what space you will need to place that skimmer in.
Yeah. I love the INT skimmers because they allow you to clean the skimmer. And we'll get to the maintenance part of it a little bit
Hmm.
later, but it's so much easier just to stick your hand there, unscrew the pump and pull it out without having to
Yep.
pull the entire skimmer out. Which is
Yep.
one of the negatives of the next type of skimmer, which is called the space saver. And a lot of people often they interchange space saver with INT, but there's a difference. The space saver has the actual pump is inside the body of the skimmer, which makes the footprint that we were just talking about it a lot smaller. So if you have a sump
Yep.
that is where you have limited space and you don't have the space for the big footprint where you have the skimmer body and the pump on the side, then there is the space saver where the pump goes inside the skimmer. And that one is just as efficient as the INT. I mean, there's really good skimmers out there.
Oh yeah.
The benefit is a small footprint, and also it works just as well. But there's also negatives to that one. Dave,
Oh yeah.
let's go over the negatives.
The negative number one is you got to provide maintenance to that pump, and in doing so, the skimmer has to come apart. So
Yes.
you have to physically remove the skimmer from the sump, open the skimmer, many thumb screws on our models, and then physically get to the pump itself. That to
Yeah.
me is the biggest drawback.
Yeah. My rule of thumb when people ask me a question is like, and it's like, they ask me, it's like, oh, the space saver looks great. And I ask them, it's like, okay, do you have the space? If you absolutely do not have the space, then go with the space saver because you have no option. But if you have the space, do not go with the space saver because the INT is so much easier to clean. It's so much easier to maintain. But sometimes you just don't have an option and you have to go with the space saver. And that's why the space saver was created, because
Yeah.
sometimes the things are getting smaller and smaller and the footprint is smaller and then you don't have space and you have to figure it out. All
It
right.
really comes in. I think it comes in handy on larger systems, Carlos. And
Mhm.
you know, I had a 400 gallons aquarium at the other office, and I had a big sump, but I didn't want to configure an external skimmer, so I was able to use the 300 SSS,
Yeah.
and that was a good fit because it's a big skimmer. But if I would have had the 300 INT, I couldn't fit it,
Mhm.
and I needed that added volume of skimming capacity. So I
Right.
think they when you get into these 2 to 400 gallon systems, they really uh, come into play.
Yeah. Now let's throw a curveball in there because we like to make
Yeah,
things more complicated. Is the external skimmer, and the external
yeah,
skimmer is kind of like it's kind of like the big the workhorse, and they are known for being highly efficient, easy to
yep,
maintain, easy to clean. But the
yep,
problem with them, or at least not a problem, but the negative is that you have to know how to install them.
yes,
Yes,
yeah,
the skimmer has to. Usually, those are reserved for bigger systems where there is no INT or there is no SSS that is big enough to handle that system, an external skimmer. The catch is that, and this is one of the questions that I get all the time. It's like my skimmer is not working, and it's because they put the skimmer at the same level as the sump. And
yeah,
remember, with an external skimmer, it has to be higher than the
higher.
sump. Always.
Mhm.
Usually, oftentimes, the external skimmer is mounted on a cabinet above the sump
Yeah,
in the back room of a 1,400 1,000 liters 1,000 gallons systems. So you
yeah.
must know how to you have to know how to plumb it correctly. That's the biggest negative on the skimmers is the installation.
Another name for an external is a recirculating skimmer. So
Hmm.
what does that mean? Is essentially, Carlos, you could take the water that's inside that external, shut off the valve, and that thing's just going to keep skimming the water inside over and over and over. So what we can do is we can make the skimmer even more efficient with an external by lowering the flow rate. You'll need a
Hmm.
dedicated pump that or manifold that just feeds that skimmer, and you can then
Hmm.
tune it to where you can skim that water over and over and over before it goes out. You know what I mean? You can
Yeah.
limit the water that goes through it. Whereas with
In other
other skimmers, you're married to the pump, and the water that it's putting in is coming out.
Yeah. In other words, the we will say to newbies is the external skimmers are reserved for more advanced people, advanced users,
Hmm.
or if you have a service account, or if you have a service company, then let them install the external skimmer for you. I do get, we do have, every now and then I get a question about the smaller external skimmers,
Yeah.
because there's this misconception out there online, and it's been around for years, that the external skimmers are far, far more efficient than an internal skimmer. And I
Hmm.
believe that's the case, Dave, on the larger systems. But
Yeah.
on the smaller systems, the new internal skimmers and the SSS are so efficient now that I don't think there's that much of a difference between the external and the internal SSS on a smaller scale. I'm talking about, 200, 100 gallons.
Yeah.
Unless you
Hmm.
absolutely don't have the space, then I would not say go out of your way for an external just because somebody online told you that the external is more efficient. Because the full picture is the external is more efficient if the skimmer is large.
Yeah.
In the smaller ones, it could go either way, I think. What do you think?
Yeah. And one other thing I wanted to mention is we're seeing a lot of these all-in-one aquariums now, where they'll
Mm-hmm.
have a small filtration area in the rear of it. We actually have an ice cap skimmer that will fit into that little filtration compartment. So it's just the options that are out there, and and, and providing a good skimmer for your system.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to to some of the frequently asked questions that we've gotten in there. There's only a couple of them that we
Yeah.
had, but they always happen. There's not a week that goes by without us getting somebody asked those questions. Okay, so the first one
Yeah.
is, and this is generic, doesn't come from anybody else, because there's so many people they ask the question. I just installed my protein skimmer, but it's not producing any bubbles. Is it broken?
Mm.
Do I need to replace it? That's the big thing. It's not broken, and people nowadays people say, "Oh, it's broken. I need to replace it."
Right.
Um, and it's kind of like, I got a flat tire. I need a new car.
Hmm.
Let's hold back. Hold on here. Let's
Hold on
talk
here.
about. Hold on. Let's talk about it first, because you don't need a new car if you only have a flat tire.
Yeah.
But okay. So the first thing I'm going to say is breaking period. And
Yeah.
Dave, that is a big one to me. That is
Yeah.
huge, because we get people saying, "Hey, I installed my skimmer and it's not working." Then I ask them, "Okay, how long has it been running?" "Oh, it's only been running for 2 days."
Hmm.
That's not going to happen. Now, what happens during the breaking period, Dave? Tell
Yeah.
me.
When you have a new skimmer, especially a new skimmer, in the manufacturing process, there's residual oils, not toxic oils, things from people's hands that are manufacturing. And this stuff needs to wear off on the acrylic in order for the bubbles to start being able to collect and form what we call a head of foam. So as you may just look like it's sitting there with an even level of foam hitting the top and no bubbles collecting and pulling any waste. It's just this break-in period that it needs to go through. Sometimes some people it could start producing immediately and they're really happy. Others people it could take a week or two before it really start seeing something. And it's called a break-in time. It's a period that's needed.
In addition to that, also is the as the water contacts the acrylic, especially on the inside walls of the skimmer, is the water contacts, and then bacteria starts to grow on the inside
Yeah.
wall of that skimmer, and that creates kind of like a slimy, very
Hmm.
slimy texture. But that slimy texture allows the skimmer to actually make those fine bubbles and actually rise. So
Yeah.
that you cannot rush nature. You cannot expect bacteria to grow in one day. It's just not going to happen. And that's part of the breaking process, that it can take, 1 or 2 weeks, is that bacteria growing and actually coating the inside wall of the skimmer so that the foam can actually rise. That's part
Yes.
of the another thing that I think is very important is the water depth in which the skimmer is installed. That is key.
Good one.
That is key, because sometimes if you put this, if I set the skimmer in 2 inches of water, it's not enough water, and you're just starving the skimmer. The skimmer doesn't have enough water to get going. It just can't. But also, if you install a skimmer in 15 inches of water, then there's not enough space for the foam to go up, because the water is so high, and it's not going to work, or it's going to overflow. So I think,
What you
go ahead.
really want to look at that when you mention in that, Carlos, is the output pipe, where the water's
Mm-hmm.
coming out. If you bury that output pipe, what's happening to that water inside? It's trying to exhaust into water that's over it, putting
Mm-hmm.
back pressure, which is causing the water level in the skimmer to
Go
to
up.
go higher to the point it overflows. This is something we see a lot.
Yeah,
So what do
we
we
see.
recommend in those cases? We say you need to raise the skimmer. We have skimmer stands for this reason. So it's a little
Yeah.
platform with adjustable legs. You can raise it, get that output right above the water output, so there's no pressure of it exhausting out into your sump. That's the
On av-
easiest way to.
on average, I'm going to say, the skimmers, usually you're okay with about 6 to 7 inches water depth.
Yep.
But again, if you have a particular skimmer, I would say either look at the instructions on the box, usually it says it, or contact the manufacturer, and they'll tell you exactly how much water, what's the water depth on that skimmer for optimal performance. So, and then the next thing, which is incredibly important, and this is where it gets tricky, it's the skimmer has to be properly sized for the system. And that
Absolutely.
one is hard, because
Huge.
Dave, you and I know online there are so many misconceptions when it comes to skimmers. People often say, oh, the larger the skimmer, the better. The larger the skimmer, the better. And that is wrong. That is incomplete. That's completely wrong. Why? It was okay years ago, before the invention of the pinwheel. After the
Yes.
invention of the pinwheel, then that concept is moot. It actually doesn't work. Let me give you an example. I have a 10-gallon fish tank with a little clownfish in there. If the online world says that I can put any skimmer I want, let me put a skimmer in there that is good for 1,000 gallons. What is going to happen to that water? That skimmer is never going to work,
Never.
because one tiny clown cannot produce enough waste for a skimmer yay big to work correctly. It's wrong.
Correct.
It's common sense. So you have to size the skimmer correctly. Now, the correct way to size a skimmer is not based on your total water volume. It's based on the water volume that holds your fish. So if you have a 50-gallon tank with a 25-gallon sump, you have to select the skimmer that is rated for 50 gallons. Let me go back to that clownfish in a small 10-gallon tank. I could have a clownfish in a 10-gallon tank and have a 100-gallon sump. So that's
10
110
gallon.
gallons of water, but it's only one fish. A skimmer for 110 gallons is not going to work, because the one fish cannot create that much waste. So I have to put a skimmer that is good for 10 gallons, not for 110. Again, I'm exaggerating, but I'm trying to make a point here, that the information online when it comes to skimmers and sizings, often 99% of the time, is wrong. And I'm trying to show you why it is wrong. So properly size a skimmer based on the tank holding the fish. Again, if you have a 100-gallon tank and a 100-gallon sump, you still have to get a skimmer that is for 100 gallons, not for 200 gallons. Dave, you could go a little bit up, and that's perfectly fine. But, like often we say, too much of something is no good either.
One of the we hear a lot is that my skimmer was working great, and now it's not pulling anything.
Mm-hmm.
And we find out that they have a skimmer that's too large for the amount of animals that are in the, they may have 3 or 4 fish and they got a big 300 internal, regal on it. And it's like, hey, it's pulling out, it's doing its job, it's pulling the organics, and then it has nothing. So it's going to have this constant fluctuation because it's just oversized for the system.
We call it a yo-yo effect. What happens is the system the system gets collects nutrients, and the nutrients keep collecting until the nutrients are enough for that skimmer to pull out. So then the skimmer pulls them out, and then the skimmer has to wait and sit until the nutrients go up again to the right level where I can pull them out. That creates, so the skimmer works and then it doesn't work, and it works and it doesn't work. It's the yo-yo effect, we call it.
Yep.
All right. So next question we have here is like, what should I do, and how often should I clean the skimmer? Do I need to clean the skimmer body, or can I just clean the pump? What do you think, Dave?
You really need to clean both. The cup being the most important, that's going to need, weekly or bi-weekly cleaning depending on the organics you're pulling. But a clean neck makes for the skimmer to be its most efficient. When you start getting a lot of sludge in that neck, the skimmer starts to slow down in terms of the organics that it can collect. So that's really a big one in keeping a clean cup and neck. The body itself, you can go, maybe that needs 6 months yearly cleaning. I know mine needs it now because I'm starting to see coralline algae in the body itself. That's just from the lights on that are around it. But the skimmer, the neck and the cup, that's the most critical.
Also, to me, you can actually take the cup and clean it, take it to your sink, wash it, whatever you need to do. That's perfectly fine. But in my opinion, cleaning the skimmer body is a little bit different. You don't want to take it out and wash it with water and soap, because what happens is, as we talked about earlier, is that there's a coat of bacteria that is inside the skimmer that facilitates the skimmer to work. So when you wash it with water and soap, all you're doing is stripping that bacteria layer from the skimmer, and therefore you're kicking the skimmer back into a pre-breaking period. Obviously, the breaking period is not going to be as long, but you will have a breaking period. It could be a couple of days or it could be a week. What I usually recommend people is take a rag and dip it in your salt water, and then just wipe the skimmer. It'll be okay.
Yeah.
Wipe it out, and then wash the rag, and you're done. That's it. That way you're not stripping that bacteria, and then your skimmer will not lose a beat. You turn it back on and it'll start to work again.
Yeah.
Now,
I never recommend any solvent or soap. Many soaps on the market have antibacterial properties to it, and that's just gonna kill, your skimmer back to break-in period.
Exactly. As far as the pump, that is the life of the skimmer. That's kind of like your heart. You got to make sure that the heart is pumping and is working correctly. So I recommend taking it out often. I'm not going to say every week, but you know what? Make it every month or every couple months. That's what I say. And don't just take the pump out and clean it from the outside. Take the pump apart, pull the volute out, the cover, pull the impeller out, and take a look at the impeller. Look at the magnet. Is the magnet swollen? Is the magnet cracked? If it's swollen or cracked, then you may have to change that impeller. Don't put it back and run it, because what you're going to do is you're going to end up damaging the pump, and then it's going to be a more expensive maintenance. Because buying an impeller is way cheaper than having to buy an entire pump. But do keep an eye on that impeller. Do that. I get on support, we get calls where the pump died and it didn't work, and we have the person pull the impeller out, and the impeller is, sometimes the impeller hasn't been clean in years, and the impeller is cracked, the magnet is cracked or swollen. And at that point, it's like, most companies out there make reliable products, but they are not indestructible. That's the big difference.
Yeah.
If you maintain the product, it'll last you a long time. If you do your oil changes, your car will last you for years. If you don't do an oil change, your car won't last you more than 3 years. The same thing with the pumps. If you take it out, if you maintain it, if you visually inspect it, it's going to last you a long time. If you just let it run for a year or two and then take it out, most likely you're going to have to replace the whole thing.
One critical component I want to mention for cleaning is the venturi. We'll get a
Yes.
lot of people that'll say, "Oh, my skimmer's working, but it's just not producing like it used to. Doesn't look like it's making many bubbles." 9 out of 10 times, this problem is if you take that venturi, and the venturi is where the air connects to the water intake on the skimmer. That's a little
Mm-hmm.
piece that comes apart. If you turn that thing upside down and look into it, you'll see where the air touches the water, and that inside that device will be like calcium buildup or like salt crystallized right there. And it's almost like a clogged artery, is
It's
best way as
choking
I
the
could describe it. It's choking it.
it's choking it. Yes.
Yeah.
So
So
what we
you could
usually
use a little brush like a bottle brush or something to get in there. And I mean, you got to really chip it away sometimes. That's how hard it
yeah.
can get.
Sometimes I used to do this a long time ago. Is I actually connected my auto top off, my freshwater auto top off into that line, and it would just
Hmm.
the auto top off would
Oh,
go
well,
through that
clean
line,
it.
which is with
Ah,
anytime my system, my evaporated water needed to be replenished with fresh water, it would automatically inject the water through it, and it would constantly keep that line clean. It would crash
wow.
the skimmer. It would crash the skimmer
Hmm.
for for like about 15 minutes, but then it would come right back up. So,
Yeah.
but watch that venturi because it gets clogged up all the time. If you don't want to, if sometimes if you just clean the pump and something, just get a syringe with fresh water and just push the fresh water into the air intake line. It'll make its way through it, and it'll rinse whatever salt crystals there are. If you have calcium buildup, then you're probably going to have to
Yeah.
take it out and scrape it off or soak it
Hmm.
in some kind of citric acid. But if it's just salt crystals, fresh water
Yeah.
injection, it'll just rinse it right through.
Hmm.
All right. So those are little things that, I mean, those are little tips and tricks on
Yep.
how to properly install the skimmer and how to properly make it work. So we talked about the different types of skimmers, and depending on what system you have and what your needs are, you can go into an INT, SSS, Space Saver, HOB, hang on back, or you do external skimmer. We talked about maintenance and installing, how to properly install the skimmer. Hopefully everybody kind of got a little bit of it.
Hmm.
If you have any other questions, please, just send us an email. You can email us at support@coralvue.com, or you can head over to support.coralvue.com, and we'll be happy to help you and answer any questions. So, consider having the protein skimmer.
Yep.
The benefits outweigh the negatives.
Yeah.
It'll make your life easier, and it'll make the system a lot more forgiving. So you don't have to stay on top of the maintenance religiously, because the skimmer will allow you to do some of that work. It just makes it a little bit easier.
And I know this is kind of a beginner video, Carlos, and we're just kind of taking maybe an experienced person through, um, the type of protein skimmers. But the plan is we'll have I'd like to do a more advanced discussion on this and really tell people about reef octopus skimmers and what makes them unique, which is really the pumps. And there's a lot of
Yep.
information there we can give, and there's a reason it's been around for 20 plus years and still probably the best sold skimmer on the market. But that's for another video.
That's for another video. That's the
Yep.
reason. That's a great segue to remind everybody to subscribe to our podcast. We also have, if you're a visual person, you can also watch us, watch our pretty faces with some overlaid videos and things like that
Yeah.
on YouTube. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you subscribe, you'll be notified right away whenever we release a new episode. So considering that a wrap, let's I wanted to first of all, say thank you to our listeners. I know this show is a podcast first, so there's a lot of listeners on Spotify, and we're adding our podcast to other platforms as we speak. We also have our viewers on YouTube, which is great. Thank you for watching, and hit that subscribe button. You know, your support is what makes us want to do this often, and this is the reason why Dave and I, do this, because we love it, but we also like knowing that we're helping somebody. That's always a great plus. As I said before, if you have any questions, or if you have any comments, or if you'd like to suggest a topic for us to cover, just head on over to support.coralvue.com, and or you can go to our social media. We have the CoralVue Cares. We have our CoralVue Facebook page. We also have Instagram, and we recently got into TikTok, which, that's a different subject. I don't know if it's going to last or not. Let's not go there. All right. So we want to big a special, big thank you to the people that make this happen behind the scenes. April, our producer, she does such a fantastic job, and you don't see her, but she spends so much time making this work. So we say thank you to April. Great dedication. We appreciate that. And of course,
Yep.
Dave, big thank you to you, my
Hey,
co-host.
well,
My
yeah, of
co-host.
course.
We always have a great time talking about it. It's kind of like
Yeah,
sitting down at a bar with a couple of beers and
right.
just chatting about this,
Exactly.
what we love. So,
It's what we
uh,
do. You said it. We love it. That's the bottom line. We love it. We hope to share the enthusiasm with other people that may love it as well.
well, with that, thank you so much, and until next time.